you doing? I'm Mike Gaddy, and welcome to this very special episode, Travel Tips for Trans. A little bit of background. I am about to sit down and talk to one of my very best friends from high school, Miles Immler. I lost touch with Miles after high school, and about 2 years ago, after he went through eight gender affirmation surgeries right here in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins, he hit me up on social media. Since then, we've become really good friends again, and we've done several episodes on our local podcast called the Patterson Park Podcast, all about what it means to be trans and growing up trans in the Baltimore area. But today we are going to talk about travel tips for transgender people, including going through TSA and what bathrooms to use and some rules of the road while you're traveling. So please, put on your headphones, sit back, and listen to me and Miles talk about one of those issues that is seldom discussed even in the LGBTQIA community. Take a listen. What are some of the issues with traveling as a trans person? Specifically, I know right now a lot of people are having difficulty with some of these laws and some of these propositions that are out regarding identification and whether you have to use your birth sex for your photo ID and that kind of thing. How is this all affecting travel and travel for the trans person right now?
Okay, well, transgender individuals with non-updated IDs are vulnerable to public scrutiny or outing, being detained, discriminated, and depending on where they are, possibly arrested. It limits their options regarding where they can travel. Getting government issued IDs updated, according to a report from Williams Institute at UCLA School of Law, about 42% of transgender people who are eligible to vote in 45 American states, they estimate that's more than 350,000 people, do not have identification documents that reflect their current name, gender, or both. Why is this? The bureaucratic hurdles to update or change gender on important documents, such as driver's licenses and passports, can be insurmountable for many individuals. A huge challenge is medical authorization, especially in the case of passports. That poses a problem for people who don't have insurance, live in rural areas, and aren't out to their providers, or haven't had certain kinds of medical and clinical treatment for various reasons. It's a big barrier to getting an updated ID.
Hard right now for transgender people, and we'll get into whether they're pre-op or post-op or whatever, but it's hard to even update your passport with your gender when it's time to do that.
That's right. I was looking into this, and currently, there are 9 states in all who still require a proof of surgery, court order, or amended birth certificate for changing the gender marker on a driver's license. There are still states that will not allow name or gender changes on birth certificates.
Won't allow they flat out won't allow you to change. So if you were born as a biological male and you realize as you're growing up that you have gender dysphoria and that is not the gender that you identify with, and so you are starting the process of going through gender change and gender affirmation surgery perhaps down the road, there are states right now that you cannot update your birth certificate.
That is correct. Birth certificates are regulated by the states in which you were born. You cannot make any changes. If they don't have it in the laws, that's it. But there is some light, but it's still difficult. And that is, if you're in that situation, you should apply for a passport, because a passport with a DS-11 form allows you to make changes to your name and your gender as long as you have a court order for the name change and medical certification for the gender marker change. But there are still specific treatments that are associated with the medical certification change. It must be done by a practicing licensed physician, worded in a certain way. And as a side note, if you have a conservative doctor, he or she may not agree that a gender transition is complete unless the patient has undergone gender, using their words, reassignment surgery. The medical certification to change from one gender to another is either for male or female only. There is no gender neutral category, so that leaves out non-binary people and intersex people.
Great. So, bottom line though, from a practical standpoint, it is better even domestically to travel with your identification as your passport because it's a little easier to update than your birth certificate based driver's license. Am I getting sort of down to the nitty gritty there?
Yes, and I'll explain why. You need your birth certificate to prove citizenship when applying for your passport. And unless you can have the medical certification for the gender marker change, they will take whatever is on your birth certificate, the gender marker, that will go on your passport. And that's the whole reason why you would need all this other documentation, including that medical certification. For the name change, you still need a certified copy of your court order, even if your name has already been changed on your other government issued IDs, driver's license, social security card, etc., etc.
So, and you would deal with the passport, your local passport office for all of this?
Yes. And the photo is also very important. The requirements for a passport: it cannot be older than 6 months. It must be a current photo that you resemble. And actually, for all photo IDs, you have to look like your picture. And it must be a recent picture.
So what if you haven't gone through gender affirmation surgery? And so you are having trouble getting the certificate from your doctor to have your sex changed on your, to provide to the passport people to have your sex changed on your passport. So let's say that you were born biologically female and you're haven't gone through the surgery. However, you are pre-op and are binding and presenting as male. So then should the photo actually be as you present?
Yes.
As a male?
Yes, the photo should be how you present yourself. And incidentally, surgery is not required for the medical certification. It is up to the doctor who's writing the certification letter and the patient. It's supposed to be mutually agreed on what is determined to be completing the transition. And also the verbiage has to be a certain way. It has to say that this person has completed the transition. If it says in process of, you can still get a passport, but it would be for 2 years versus the 10 years. And then you would just have to apply again. Also, another thing that's problematic with the picture is that this can affect trans women, because there have been some instances where trans women are not allowed to wear makeup in their photographs, or for whatever reason cannot appear as their expressed gender in photographs, and that has been problematic too.
Yeah. Especially if you aren't on hormones and and the requirement is that your picture represent how you appear, and you can't wear makeup, but generally speaking, you wear makeup because you appear and present as female. I'm getting this correct, right? So
yes,
then you sort of are in a catch-22.
It is what it is. I remember reading a story not long ago about a trans woman who was required to wash her makeup off her face to pose for the picture for her driver's license. And meanwhile, the cisgender women did not have that requirement.
Gender means non-transgender, and you identify with the gender you were assigned when you were born.
Correct.
Okay. I can't believe that there's this sort of catch-22 on not being able to, on the rules of travel with passport, especially with makeup, and
right.
Your photo has to be as you appear. And, that's really, really pretty unbelievable. What is the general recommendation for people when they're embarking on a trip who may not be frequent travelers? What are some basic, this is what you should keep in mind rules to keep them out of trouble?
Okay. Well, the first thing is to remember to bring all of your documents with you. Try to travel with documents that reflect who you currently are. Photo, name, gender marker, etc. At a minimum, make sure your photo reflects how you currently look. Make sure your travel reservations are in the name that appears on the IDs and documents that you will bring with you. You must use your legal name as required by law. Do not bring IDs or documents that bear your pre-transition identity if you have updated your IDs. You don't want that. Consider, if you're going to fly, consider applying for a TSA pre-check. The pre-check application process runs a background check on all applicants, and as a result, the screening process moves quicker. There's a TSA Cares helpline, 855-787-2227, that you can call with questions or concerns about screening policies and procedures. You may request the assistance of a passenger support specialist who can provide assistance when you arrive at the airport. Research your destination thoroughly. Read up on local laws regarding LGBTQ plus people. Some places are much more restrictive than others, and it is better to know your rights and not need them than to be stuck in a jail cell somewhere.
So what are some of the challenges that are unique to trans people when they're traveling? And I'm thinking particularly of the body scanners and prosthetics that trans people may be using while they're going through this process. Are there different challenges for pre versus post-op trans people? What can you tell me about that?
Okay, well, I'll start with if you're going to fly and you're at the airport, all people have to go through a body scanner with TSA agents. You will be screened by walk-through metal detectors or advanced imaging technology, or AIT. When you enter the imaging portal, the TSA officer presses a button designating a gender, male or female, based on how you present yourself. The machine has software that looks at the anatomy of men and women differently. The equipment conducts a scan and indicates areas on the body, warranting further inspection if necessary. In some cases, automatic target recognition, or ATR software, can register body contours not typical for a person's gender as anomalies. Foreign objects, such as prosthetics, binding garments, or even paper or change left in a pocket, will commonly register as anomalies, requiring further screening. At checkpoints using body scanners, a pat-down is the only alternative to being scanned. A pat-down may also be required if an anomaly is identified by the machine, if your clothing is very loose or on a random basis.
Yeah, TSA, I get paid all the time. Yeah. I just let them pat me down, baby. I do. I swear to God, I get random 1 out of every 3 trips easily.
Yeah. Okay, well, I had an experience going through the TSA and ended up with a pat down that was different on both times. This was about 6 years ago when I was flying to Hawaii. I mean, not Hawaii, Miami. I wish Hawaii. This was the first year of my transition, and my husband and I were going on vacation. I was pre-op and had only just started hormone therapy. So I was only passing about 50% of the time. I wore my chest binder, and I packed my prosthetic in my carry-on bag. My chest binder set off the alarm when I went through the machine, which prompted the TSA agent to question it and give me a pat down. I was perceived as male on the day we left for Miami, and then as female when returning home. I was patted down by a male TSA agent the first time and a female TSA agent the second time. Now, they have a policy that you are supposed to be patted down by a member of the same gender. And so I asked the woman TSA agent why she was patting me down, and I told her I was male. She apologized, but she didn't stop patting me down. She still resumed until she was done. I had a moment where I thought about reporting her to the supervisor, but didn't, because I didn't want to draw attention to the incident for fear of getting into trouble or being outed, detained, and missing my flight. I kept a low profile for safety reasons. So I just, I just accepted her apology and moved on. I didn't have the opportunity to show my ID or the travel letter that I had explaining I was transgender that I had written for me for situations like that. And because they were being run through the X-ray scans at the time. So it was awkward. I wasn't happy about it, but there have been worse experiences in that. People being detained and asked a lot of questions, having to go for a very invasive pat down in a private screening. So at least that didn't happen to me.
Yeah. And you said you had an experience at a tour bus stop. And I'm particularly interested in this because a lot of the people who attend the travel and adventure shows do so to find tours and specifically to go on some of these tours, both here in the United States and in Europe. So, what do you feel comfortable telling me about that experience?
Okay. Well, I encountered a problem getting to a bathroom during my vacation. We were at a public rest stop on a tour. There were only 2 stalls in the men's bathroom, and neither of them had a door. And I had to go really bad. And there were no other bathrooms around except the women's bathroom across the way. And I entered the women's bathroom, and it was crowded with women lined up waiting to use the stalls. And I ended up standing in the line with the women as a few of them gawked and stared at me. They looked confused as to why I was there. Some read me as male and thought that I was a security guard, possibly on bathroom patrol or something. I was determined to use the bathroom because I didn't want to pee my pants. I struggled to hold my bladder until I made it into the stall, but I made it. I left immediately after and heard a couple of the ladies snicker as I walked out. Yeah, and this was one of the reasons why, well, further in my transition, I would wear a what is known as a STP device, which stands for stand to pee. It's a prosthetic. And so that you could stand while peeing, because that image of the stalls with no doors and the horror of, if I even tried to use a bathroom of being found out with the wrong equipment was horrifying. But yeah.
To back up a second for those who are less familiar with the trans community, when you're recognized as being a trans person by non-trans people, the term is being clocked. So some of those women in that bathroom clocked you as being a trans person and then took it upon themselves to find that as a source of amusement to them, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if they knew or everyone knew at the time what trans people were because this was 6 years ago.
Right.
Or they just thought I was strange looking or just a dumb person in the wrong bathroom. I I don't know what they were thinking. But yeah, some of them thought I was a security guard. That was amusing. Like, yeah, here I am on bathroom patrol. That
A
was
male, right. Well, no,
yeah, yeah.
they were bright.
Standing around with the ladies.
Um, just to wrap up, because we're running a little bit out of time, I just wanted to, when we talked before, you had mentioned that that you had considered going to Serbia for some of your surgeries before Hopkins reopened their clinic and you were able to do those surgeries here in Baltimore. And I'm a little bit curious. Oh, and you had sent me something from Chaz Bono, an article on Chaz Bono, saying that he had considered also going to Serbia. I assume it's the same doctor or clinic that you were looking at.
Yes.
My question is, are a lot of people, do you think a lot of trans people are looking at going to Serbia? And what do you say if you had gone, and I know you didn't, I know you had a year in Baltimore, but if you had gone, what is it when the TSA, they don't call them there in Serbia, when the passport control agent asks you why you're coming into Serbia, what is recommended that you tell them? Do you flat out say I'm here for gender affirmation surgery, or do you just say for medical reasons, or what?
I would have been upfront that I was going there for surgery, but I would have referred to it as congenital reconstructive surgery to correct a birth defect.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like good advice.
Not knowing the attitudes of the people whom I'm speaking and dealing with, I think that is the safest way to just use the clinical language.
Yeah.
And also another reason why it's important not to hide it, because it will be impossible to hide the fact that you have had surgery when you're coming back with wounds, scars, first aid, bandages, and all of that cannot be hidden, especially when you're going through the TSA scans again.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. When Miles and I work together on an episode like this, we send messages back and forth about what we need to make sure we include and what maybe belongs in another episode somewhere else. This was no exception, and Miles really wanted me to highlight something about bathrooms. For transgender people, the most important thing is to use the bathroom where you feel safest, even if you're being clocked. The rules might be a little bit different for transgender men versus transgender women, just for practical reasons. So please, if you are concerned, keep in mind the number one rule is to use the bathroom you feel most safe in. Meanwhile, I hope you got a lot out of this episode. Please join me as I sit down with Miles again and we talk about the LGBTQIA best and worst places to travel to in another tasty tidbit. Meanwhile, have a great show.